The public has a long-held fascination with detectives. Detectives see a side of life the average person is never exposed to. In this podcast series, I Catch Killers with Gary Jubilant, I'll be interviewing a whole range of people you come across as a detective, including police, bad guys and victims. I spent 34 years as a cop. For 25 of those years I was catching killers. That's what I did for a living. I was a homicide detective. I'm no longer just interviewing bad guys. Instead, I'm taking the public into the world in which I operated. The guests I selected have amazing stories from all sides of the law. The interviews are raw and honest, just like the world they inhabited. No one who steps into the world of crime comes out unchanged. Join me now while I take you into this world. This episode of I Catch Killers contains conversations that some listeners may find confronting or triggering. Discretion is advised. Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. Today we're recording from a very trendy warehouse in inner city Sydney. The guests I've got today I think you're going to find very interesting. It's Karen Davis. Karen was a police officer for 20 years. She worked in general duties as a detective and also as an undercover operative. Karen, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
It's a pleasure. I think you've got some fascinating stories like most police officers, some of which are sad, funny, and a little bit heavy on some parts.
Everyone's got a combination of stories, haven't they?
Yeah. Now, you spent 20 years in the police, but you also had a career outside or having a career outside the police, and you've become a successful author, and you've completed 3 crime fiction books.
That's right, yeah. Strange story, didn't expect that when, being a police officer, you think you're going to be a cop forever, really. But, things happen. Life isn't always predictable and led me in a different course. So,
well, the character in there, and we will get to that during the podcast,
I know.
Lexi Rogers.
Yep.
And I met your daughter today, and she, in fact, wanted to find out whether Karen Davis is, in fact, Lexi Rogers. So we'll get to that.
Sure.
But before we do, why did you join the police?
I was about 16, careers week at school. My best girlfriend said to me, I think, I'd like to be a police officer. I think she just pulled it out of the sky. So I said, yeah, I'll do that too, as you do when you're 16, your best friends, you're going to do everything together. As we kind of went through school and did year 11 and 12, which you needed to do to get in back in those days, and she decided that, the police force wasn't dangerous enough for her, and she became a preschool teacher. And
kindergarten cop.
Yeah, and I kind of looked into it a bit more. Some of my friends were joining and stuff, and realised it was they were having a great time at work, very exciting. I like the idea of being able to, maybe make a difference in the community, doing something different every day.
This was in the 80s, 1987 you joined the academy?
I did. I joined, I was at the beginning of 1987. I was the first class of 200, which was a really big class down at Goulburn at the academy. And we had, I think it was 25% female. So
I think at that time, because we were trying, and I joined the police 2 years earlier in 85,
right, yeah.
And I think there was some push to get more females in the police.
There was a big push, and I think I kind of got pushed through very quickly. I applied when I left school. They closed applications right on the day that our HSC results came out in 1985, so no one could get in because they were obviously just full. And but then about halfway through 86, they had the big drive, and I pretty much put my application in, did all the physical and everything, did all the tests, and was in that first class of the large intake. It was also the one without height requirements.
But I don't think you would have missed out on the height requirement.
No, nearly 5'10",
yeah.
so I wasn't worried about that part of it. But okay. It was the first class without any height requirements.
And that was a push to change the police from the traditional 6 foot bloke, football player, and mix it up a bit. Have women in the police, and also people, just because they're under 6 foot or whatever the height restrictions was, didn't necessarily mean they couldn't be a good police officer.
That's right. Yeah, we had a jockey in our class, but I think he went to Mount Druitt, so God knows what happened to him. But he was he wanted to go into the Mounties later on, but he was about under 5 foot.
Yeah.
So as long as you could pass everything and the physical and everything, you know.
So joining as a female growing up, did you have resistance from family or friends that wanted to? Because it wasn't in the 80s, and now we look at it now and it seems almost ridiculous. Like you accept it's a career for
the norm.
There's no distinction between man or female in the police, but in those times it was not.
It was quite unusual. Yeah, a lot of people would look
career.
at me do a double take and go, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Like,
So what sort of support did you get?
oh, mum and dad were very supportive. They were concerned. There was no one else in my family who had joined the police force. But my boyfriend from school, he was a bit older than me, a couple of years older, and he'd already joined and he went to Redfern. So I was hearing all these stories about all these exciting things that were happening at Redfern and thought, gee, that's for me. I didn't really want a 9-to-5 job. I wanted something different all the time. And so that's kind of how I got hooked on it. And
did your boyfriend want you to join?
no, he didn't. That's right. I was losing where I was going there. But he took me to Redfern Police Station and introduced me to all the girls there. And there was a really good group of females there at the time. And they said, oh, leave her with us and, you go away and come back and get her later. So they took me into this little room and I was a bit scared of them actually because some of them were quite, very confident and intimidating, I suppose you'd say.
That comes out and I see that when people join the police, they get that confidence after a couple of years on the street. And
that's right. Yeah, they used to, especially at Redfern at that time. Yeah. And as soon as they shut the door and he was gone, they went, "You've got to join. It's fantastic. It's great. We love it."
So in front of them, he was trying. The girls were saying, "Oh, you shouldn't join."
Yeah, that's right.
But when he went.
They said, you leave and we'll give her the facts. We'll tell her what it's really like. And as soon as the door's shut and he's gone, they were telling me how great it was and what a great career it was for a female. And, you're crazy if you don't. So I walked out pretending I was really disheartened and, wasn't interested anymore, but went ahead and applied and did it anyway.
And why was he trying to stop you joining?
Well, I don't really. I just think he didn't. I thought at first it was, maybe he didn't want me to see some of the things that he knew I was going to see. But later on in reflection, I think he just didn't want me to be exposed to all the nice uniformed young men that I was going to meet along the way.
That can sometimes be a motivation for a boyfriend.
So,
anyway, we won't name him or discuss.
No.
Yeah, but that's in the past. So, first days down at the academy.
Oh God, I wanted to leave by the Wednesday. We started on the Monday morning, got down there the Sunday night.
Come down there on the Sunday night, and you're all nervous.
I know I'd already met a few people along the way. I actually had about three guys in my class were from school, so I knew a few people, which was great. And we went to the bar that night, and one of the instructors came up to me and said, "Look, can I talk to you outside? I can see some of the guys from the class in front are kind of hanging around all you girls." So I went out onto this balcony, and he was senior constable, and he said, "Look, I want you to come to me if there's any problems, if you're getting hit on or whatever, if you're really uncomfortable, come to me." And I said, "Oh, how nice is this? What a nice guy." And then he just put his arm around me and gave me a big squeeze and and a wink. And I just went, oh, my God. I was 19, really naive, innocent. I thought, oh, my God, what am I in for?
Policing in the 80s.
Exactly. So, but, that was all good. I think by the Wednesday we had a
because just on that, and there's a whole range of things that we can discuss about that, but just on that, I don't think the men in the police force at the time, and it's not, I don't want to make this a sexist discussion, but the men in the police didn't know how to react. They'd been in this environment with all this blokey bloke environment.
Mostly men, yeah.
And then girls have come in, and some of them didn't know how to deal with it.
I think that's true too. And I think some of the instructors didn't know how to deal with it as well. But there was one instructor who was a really big guy, but he ended up being a really lovely guy, but he was scary looking. Yeah. And this day it was 40-degree heat. I was down there in summer in Goulburn. It's either extreme, isn't it? It's either cold or hot. And I was squinting into the sun and he thought I was smiling. So he made the rest of the class do push-ups on their knuckles on the hot cement while I stood and watched. So I was real popular, as you can imagine.
That would make you popular, yeah.
Later on, he came up to me later on that afternoon and just said, "I'm really sorry, I hated doing that, but, we've got to be tough those first couple of weeks." And he ended up being a really nice guy. But I rang Mum and Dad that night and I said, "That's it. I'm done. I'm coming home." I don't like it. They're not very nice down here. They yell at you. They make you do push-ups on your knuckles and drag handcuffs off your hands. And, I said, it's not quite what I thought it would be. And my father just said, "Well, we've changed the locks. You're not coming home. You've waited too long to get in and you're not giving up." That was probably
good advice from him, wasn't
exactly.
it? Because it's...
I wasn't really going to, give up anyway, but it was just, it was just a bit of
takes
frustration.
You out of the comfort zone.
Yeah, massively. Yeah.
And part of it was that, you call it bastardisation, but I think it's breaking you down so they can rebuild you.
I think so too.
That's they break you all down. They see how you cope under pressure, and then rebuild you. That seems to be what it's about.
Well, like I said, there was 200 in our class to start with, and we finished with 175.
Right.
3 months later, a few got kicked out along the way. But I know 2 walked out the first day and just went, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you don't even know what it's about yet. You haven't even given it a chance. But maybe that was the best thing they could do. It's, it wasn't for them. They might have had a completely different idea of what it was about. But I think the camaraderie and the friendships and that you made, I'm not sure about now so much because the classes, I was talking to someone the other day who's a sergeant in the police, and he was in a class of 800. And so how do you even know your mates in the class? Whereas
it's a shame, really.
We have a reunion every year, and a lot of it's great. We always have a once or twice a year.
You become close through that adversity.
Exactly.
And that, doing push-ups on your knuckles in the hot sun. You share a common bond.
And all those drinks at the bar every night. No, of course not. Well, we didn't do that.
But they had the bar there.
Yeah, well, that's where you kind of got to know each other. Really.
And I remember the bar, and that's where you had to study, so you weren't there every night.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And there was a lot that you had to get through, and learning your laws and all your powers. But the bar was a good place to socialise and just sort of ease you into the world.
Yeah, a good place to get to know everybody, and everybody helped each other through. Like the ones that were having trouble with the physical side of things, running and stuff. Yeah. The good runners would help them get through that, and the ones that were having trouble with the Crimes Act and the whatever you're doing at that time, everybody else would kind of jump in and try and help the ones that were kind of having trouble with a certain subject or certain area.
So how did you feel when you graduated?
I thought I knew everything. I suppose. No, I didn't think I knew.
You're 10 foot
pretty
tall.
you feel pretty prepared because you think
this
is pretty intense training for 3 months until you hit the station, of course, and then you realise you know nothing. But they used to tell us at the academy we were lower than trainee dogs. So, that was the pecking order. And so you're, okay. So you could only go up from there. But
tell me about, was Newtown was your first police station?
Yeah, I started at Newtown in 87.
Tell me about your first day there.
I walked in, brand new uniform and 19 years of age, and senior constable was standing behind the counter, and I said, "Hi, I'm Karen here for my first day." And he just looked at me and started laughing. I was pretty skinny back then, and just looked at me and goes, "I hope you enjoy being thrown across bars." And not really, but I was, and he said, "There's a constable's room, go in there." So I've walked in there, and then tried to stand in the corner, like trying to make myself invisible until my academy mates turned up, because there was another 3 from the academy.
It's like your first day of the new school, isn't it?
Oh, it's scary. Yeah. It was scary, and everyone was just going about their business as if I wasn't really there. And then this senior constable, really huge guy, he came over and introduced himself to me, and he said, "Oh, hi. How old are you?" and asked me a few questions. And as he's talking to me, he sat down on a chair and he pulled a big, just a round garbage bin from the corner, put it between his legs. He opened a can of tuna, started eating over the garbage bin like that, and asked me what I was doing for dinner. And I'd been there for 5 minutes.
It's a podcast, so I can't do the visuals, but I'm sitting here cringing.
And one of the other guys who's still a friend today, he just said, "Oh, give her a minute. She's just walked in the door." Went, "Oh, okay." So that was my first couple of minutes.
That is crashing into the world that was policing in the 80s.
What am I doing here? What is this place? And then, I was also told not to leave my bag around because things would go missing. Yeah. And I'm thinking, this is a police station. Yeah. What? Like, it should be the safest place in the world. But, there was a few things going on at the time, and you couldn't leave things lying around. Hat badges were going missing. A few guns went missing from lockers. Money was going missing from the boss's safe, and turned out to be one person that was, later on identified. But that was all in the first couple of days of me arriving.
Not what you'd expect.
No, not at all.
So, and I think you get to that police station, and as you said, when you leave the academy, you think you know so much, and you're ready for it. But that's where the starting.
We start learning,
police officer
definitely. Occurs. Yeah, that's right. And you get your buddy, which is someone who trains you for the first 6 weeks.
Who was your buddy?
John Lehmann. Do you know John Lehmann?
Yeah, I do know John Lehmann.
Yeah.
He finished up in unsolved homicide.
Yeah, I better not. Since I've named him now, I have to say nice things about him. But no, he was a really good buddy. He was very good. I was lucky.
He would have been a steady hand to show.
He was, and he'd only been there 3 years, but I thought he knew everything. Like he was seasoned, and he was protective, but not overly protective. He let me do things, but he also was he's like a big brother. You know, like I just felt very safe with him.
Yeah.
And I was lucky in that way. I did work with some good guys, John Battelle and some other guys that I won't name all of them because I'll get in trouble if I don't name the right ones.
Yeah.
But
a bunch of good people.
they you know, just I'd often work with ones, and they were only a couple of years senior to me, but they knew their stuff. Newtown was an extremely busy station, so you learnt pretty fast.
It was a pretty rough area in those times, in the 80s, lots of pubs.
It was, 62 licensed premises actually in the area.
There you go. That is a lot.
And it was also a bit of a punishment station for, you know, naughty police who might have done something wrong along the way.
I never understood that concept, and there are police stations like that, and they say a punishment station. So it's almost, let's identify all the dysfunctional police officers, and we'll put them all in the one group, and
which
see
is
how
really
they survive.
silly in the first place, isn't it?
I agree, but it did seem to be the norm.
That was maybe the idea behind it was, let's put them somewhere where they're not just going to sit back and do nothing. But if it's so busy, you know, well, let's make them work. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. Why? Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a few stations, without naming names, that were identified as the punishment station, and it was a pack of lunatics there.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly.
But, so your first day's out on the street. So that's your impression when you go into the police station. You got your shiny new uniform on. You got a gun on the side of your hip.
Yeah.
And when you go out on the street.
Actually, one of the first days I was out in the street, a guy came up to me and asked if it was a real gun that I had, because I was a female. I said, do they really give females real guns?
How do you react to comments like that?
I just had to laugh. I just said, no, it's plastic.
Yeah.
And he went, I thought so, and walked away. Really?
That made him feel comfortable.
Really? But I got asked that question a few times. Do they give the girl, like in the early days, do they give the girls a real gun?
Well, see, my understanding is the early days with policewomen, they weren't given guns to start with. And
really?
So, yeah.
Well, I think back in a long time ago, they were just mainly lecturing at schools and stuff, weren't they?
So you encounter that with the public just not even identifying. And I would actually, you've brought something up that I remember that I'd worked with senior policewomen, like 5 years senior. They knew what was going on. I had no idea. But I'd turn up as a probationary constable in uniform, and the policewoman would be there, the senior constable, but the crooks or the public or whatever would look to me, and I'd be standing there going, I don't know what to do.
Always. Yeah. I found that too, especially when you're working in areas with diverse, you know, cultures with different nationalities and stuff. Some of the men just would not speak to me. I would have to, when I was senior, I'd have to say, you're talking to me. I'm the boss here, and some of them still wouldn't. They'd talk to the junior constable, who would be a guy. If you had two girls, they wouldn't know where to look. But yeah, it was.
You've raised culturally too. Some cultures are not comfortable with a police woman with the authority, and find offence in talking to the policewoman. But I remember it from my point of view. It was awkward for me because I didn't know even how to answer the questions I was being asked. But they wouldn't speak to the policewoman.
And what are you told when you come out of the academy? You're just told to shut up and just learn and don't put your foot in it. Don't say too much. Yeah. You just learn. So people, you know, when they're forcing you, in your case, making you answer questions, and you're going, I shouldn't be saying anything. So yeah, I get where you'd be coming from too.
When you're out there on the street, when did you first really feel like you're a police officer?
Oh, God.
What job was it? Was it something where you thought, I've got this, I understand what it's about now?
Probably almost a year into it, I was getting pretty confident by then because at that time, like, I was a senior person on a car by 9 months in, so I was still in my probation. And I'm training ones that are just coming out of the academy, I'm thinking, I've been here for 9 months and I feel like I've been here for 10 years.
People would be shocked by that.
Yeah, very much, especially the public. Like
9 months in, and you're the senior person on the car.
Yeah, that's right. And I wasn't the only one. It was just the way it was. Because of the rank structure, they didn't have enough police or whatever at the time. I can't think of a situation where I thought, oh, this is it. I think I've got it figured out, because I don't know whether you've ever got it completely figured out. Every situation's different. But I suppose within about a year, I was reasonably confident that I knew what I was doing. And back then, if you weren't real sure about something, you could go back to the station and ask your station sergeant, who would give you the advice. And if you made a mistake, I mean, the first time I arrested somebody, it was the wrong person. We were looking for somebody, and I thought I was going to end up in jail, but. It was the day that Alan McQueen was shot.
The police officer was shot in the park in Sydney.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I was working the day shift, and we had alerts out saying he's around the area. They thought he was around the Newtown area.
Dreadlock type.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember that.
They got him a couple of days later. And we saw somebody, I was actually on beats and I was walking around, and we saw a guy matching the description completely, looked like he was breaking into a house.
Yep.
So I thought, oh my God, and called out, stop police, and he's just totally ignored us.
Yep.
And my partner and I we're hiding behind telegraph poles and kind of trying to get closer and closer. He's not reacting to us at all. We're screaming out and he's still trying to break in this window. And finally got up behind him, grabbed him, pulled him off the window. And he's looked so surprised. Like, I said, how could you not hear us?
Yeah.
Well, he was deaf. So what he was actually doing was he'd lost his key, and he was living with his brother, who just happened to be a barrister.
Right.
And he was climbing in the window to get into the house, and he was deaf and dumb, so he couldn't hear us and he couldn't communicate with us. So at this time...
That's a great mistake to make, discriminate against disadvantaged person.
Exactly.
And then,
what a horrible policewoman.
Barrister, yeah.
And I thought, and then when we got him back to the station and it all kind of came out, he handed me a card with his brother's name. Yeah. He's got barrister, and I went, oh, I'm dead. This is not going to be good. And rang the barrister, and he said to me, he was fantastic. He said, I can imagine how much pressure you guys are on. I know what's happening. You're all out looking for that guy that shot the cop. And he came and got him. He said, thanks for looking after him for me.
Doesn't that make a difference when you get a reaction like that?
I just went, whoa, because we were kind of laughing. I was thought, what the hell's going to happen here? I've accidentally brought somebody back who's not a baddie at all.
And I know in that day and age, I like to think I know it was the way I was taught. If I made a mistake, if you made a mistake and you were genuinely trying to do the right thing, you were supported.
You were supported, that's right.
I'm not quite sure if it's the way things operate now.
There's probably a lot more pressure on them now.
Yeah, people seem to get thrown under the bus.
Yeah,
if mistakes. But my management style in policing was always if you make a mistake out of genuine attempt to do the right thing,
that's right.
I'll support you.
Yeah, for sure.
And that type of mistake is a classic type of mistake you can make.
Well, it's just circumstance. It's just like a series of unfortunate events.
Yeah.
But you learn from that too. And everything you do, you learn from. But
there's always like in uniform, whether it's uniform or detectives or any area in the policing, there's always that seasoned cop that you always feel comfortable when they're on your shift.
That's true.
Did you have people like that?
Yeah, there was. There was a couple of seasoned cops that were just old school and just, got the job done, were quite funny to work with and all that. Yeah, I was lucky I worked with a few like that.
And they could take anything in their stride where everyone else is running around panicking and they'd seen it, done it.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I think there was a lot of I think if you'd been at Newtown for a couple of years, most of the cops there had been, they'd seen a lot. So there wasn't really anything that shocked too many people, I don't think.
Yeah.
It's you mentioned something before, and I was just going to tell you the morgue story, which part of you were talking about females and stuff like that, and one in that first week where you do your induction, they take you to all different areas to show you, expose you to all the different places in the station and stuff. And back in those days, I don't think they do it anymore. They took you down to the city morgue, which was at Glebe then. You remember doing that?
Yeah, my first week. Down to the morgue, see all the bodies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they took us down there, and that was the thing I was dreading because I'd never seen a dead body before, and was worrying how I was going to react. And I thought, I don't want to be the girl that faints. I don't want to be make a fuss. And I had 3 males with me out of my academy class. And the big burly sergeant, he was kind of walking around behind me, like with his arms out, ready to catch me in case I just dropped to the floor. And we got there and they said, oh, you're in luck today. We haven't got 1 autopsy, we've got 8. And I was like, oh, my God, 2 types of luck. But anyway, so it was really nothing like you see out of CSI or anything. You were just standing right next to where they were doing the autopsy, just wandering around.
It's confronting, isn't it?
It was crazy. It was like it was not real.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, got through that, and I thought, oh, thank God, that's over. That's the worst of it now when I go to a deceased, because everyone said to me, Newtown has you're going to be at the morgue a lot. And so one of the morgue attendants said to me, why don't you just go into the fridge? And the fridge apparently can hold up to, well, it did then, 340 bodies. And the reason for that was because if a jumbo jet went down in Sydney Airport, they'd have enough room to store them. And so it was like a big Kmart store, as you'd probably remember. It was
Yeah.
just huge and cold. And so they said, go in there and have a look around at all the different bodies and get yourself familiar. And so what I didn't know was the morgue attendant held back the 3 males that I was with. And as I walked in, he shut the big metal doors behind me and turned the lights out. So I was stuck in the fridge, this massive fridge with God knows how many dead bodies, and just not daring to move because I thought if I move, I'm going to walk into one and then I'll have a heart attack and be in here with them anyway. And so I don't know how long I was in there for. I just kind of stood still and thought, oh my God, this is a bit of a test, which of course it was. Yeah. And then after a couple of seconds, 30 seconds or whatever, he opened the door and just said, how'd you like that? I said, I won't be going in there again. I never went back in there again.
No,
it was a test,
yeah,
and it was my colleagues, the poor guys, they're standing there going, oh, I'm so sorry, the looks on their faces. We didn't know that was going to happen. I've gone back to the station. Everyone's telling the story, how funny it was. And one of my girlfriends who'd been there about 2 years, a police officer there, she's still a good friend, she'd been there 2 years before me, and she said, oh, you know what they did to me? They took me down to the RPA morgue. They put a body on the table, or what she thought was a body. It was covered in blood, which was tomato sauce. And as she got close to it, the body sat up and ran at her.
That's
sick, isn't it?
It is sick, and I don't even know if I should be laughing. I'm not sure if I'm laughing, but that's
funny now.
It's funny now, but that's that black comedy that police work creates. And
exactly.
Yeah, when you sit down and you talk to police and they talk about things that happen and they'll laugh at it, tragic things, but it is almost a coping mechanism.
It is, definitely.
And like people would be horrified thinking that,
I know.
but I could imagine, what did you do? What did your friend do?
She ran. What would you do?
I wouldn't have run.
Of course.
I would have screamed.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done. I think I might have just dropped to the floor. She ran out of the way, and then, of course, they've all started laughing and stuff. But it was a thing they probably did it to the guys as well. Yeah. But because the girls were a minority and, they kind of
Speaking of that, the girls being the minority, when you came there to the police station, there would have been the old timers that would have just been mortified that the women were allowed to work the truck and that type of thing. Did you have any experiences with ones that made it hard for women?
The younger ones that were only a few years older than me were great. Yes, the older ones did have a bit of some of them had a bit of an attitude that police women shouldn't be in the job.
Yeah.
I have been called a dickless Tracy by a boss.
Yeah.
I've been told when I was applied to do the undercover course that why would I bother? I was 23, I'd be having kids soon. Things like that. Yeah, you did get that. It was old school thinking. Why would we spend money on you do a course or you do this and then you're going to get married and have kids and, leave or whatever. So I did have that. We had the occasional older guys, having a few drinks after work and then stumbling back to the station and, wanting to give you a hug and a kiss on the cheek. And
totally inappropriate.
Totally inappropriate. But, you kind of just dealt with it.
Well, it's interesting different ways that people deal with it. And I know people from your time in the police, that was a norm and they had to deal with it.
Well, I remember asking another female police officer who'd been there for about 5 years. She was a first class constable, which means, you've been in for 5 years. So I thought she was so old, like she was about 25.
Old and experienced.
Yeah, exactly. And she said, deal with it or get out. And that was kind of the attitude. Well, you figure out how to conduct yourself or deal with it. So that's kind of what you did.
But we know that you shouldn't have to put up with that, but that was the reality of policing back in those times.
It was. And, you couldn't get away with it now, obviously, and you've got to be. It's actually gone to the extreme of you've got to watch everything you say. But back then that's the way it was, and I didn't have any terrible, scary experiences with police like any older male police officers. Actually, I did once when I was a bit older, but that's another story.
you dealt with it.
Yeah, I dealt with it. I just that was in a squad, and he was very aggressively. Pursuing me, and I just had to say I can't work with him anymore. And
it was good you took a stand.
Yeah, well,
it shouldn't be accepted, but I can understand how difficult it would be because
I didn't want to, because you don't want to be labelled a troublemaker or a problem child
or anything.
And that's
the culture of the police that you're all in this together.
That's
and
right,
to put your hand up and say no, that's not right. It is very difficult to do.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Did you have any female role model that you looked up to, or a collective group of females that the way they conducted themselves in the police?
I think the people that I've looked up to are a combination. It's not just one, but like, as you know, when you're in general duties, you're not working with a partner every day. You're working with different people. So I had, the regulars that I worked with, and most of them are still friends today. So I'd say it'd be a combination. There weren't many females there that were above me. Like there was a couple.
Yeah, because at that time it was really, there was only a few
Well, there was
small percentage.
None in the detectives when I first got there. Later on, that changed. They had one or two, but there was absolutely none in the detectives. It was just a handful of us in general duties, and a few came after me, which was really good. And we're still all good friends today too. So after I got there, a couple of months later, another girl came, and then another one, and then we kind of had a little group that we kind of socialised with.
The sisterhood going.
Yeah, well, we did, and we kind of
you needed to in
had
that
each other's backs a bit more. Yeah.
How long did you spend in general duties?
About 6 years.
Okay.
Yep.
What did you see that shocked you? And I'm not talking the morgue, but the type of things going to crime scenes or accidents or that all police have stories of things that sort of stick with them.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, everybody's got, all police and emergency services have got stories. I think there are so many, but I think it was just all the death. So at one stage, if everybody was, sometimes you get on a roll where you'd just be going to deceased after deceased. And I did like 5 in one shift once. And because we're a car crew and we were off at RPA hospital, which somebody dies under suspicious circumstances or unnatural, they had to call us in, even if it was just an old person.
And can you just explain when you say you did 5 deceased in one shift? So,
that sounds really weird, doesn't it?
What exactly does that entail?
Well, basically, you're just filling out the paperwork. You're finding out why they died, how they died, circumstances, and all the rest of it.
But that's speaking to the family.
That's speaking to the family, speaking to the staff at the hospital, or if it's at a house, talking to whoever's there. And then reporting on it making a brief if it had to go to the coroner's court. So, and I mean, some would get there and you wouldn't need to go that far, but would often be called anyway. So what would happen is if, there was 2 cars on, two cars on shift that afternoon, one's tied up with a deceased, which would take a while. And so the other one would be doing all the other work. And so instead of tying up 2 cars and going, well, we'll get that, number 1 and number 2 to go to another deceased, we'll just keep that one going. Yep, they'll be there, and and you just rolled on.
It's talking to the families that have just lost their loved one.
That's
and
right.
That makes it difficult. And you walk out of there and you're pretty well drained to do 5 in one shift.
I was getting confused towards the end of it who I was speaking to.
Yeah.
But, and I think one of them was a suicide too, like a 16-year-old boy. So in the Newtown area at that time, we used to do a lot of drug overdoses, and then there was a lot of suicides too. I don't know why, but my first actual crime scene was a 15-year-old who killed herself in her father's doctor's surgery. At the time, she was actually the niece of a commissioner, someone who became police commissioner. She was 15 and she wrote a letter basically abusing her father. That we got there, myself and another guy that I was working with quite all the time. He was about 18 months senior to me. And I remember just looking at her because I was only 3 or 4 years older than her. And she was an attractive, tall, good-looking girl, looked like she would have, everything going for her. I had no idea what I was doing because that was the first, one of the first deceased I did. And my partner's called crime scene in to take photos and all that kind of stuff. And just as all this was happening, her father, who was a doctor in the surgery, turned up, and he's looked over my shoulder because we were kind of trying to cordon off the toilet where she was, and he's gone berserk because he's seen his daughter. And he started kicking and pushed me out of the way and started screaming and we didn't know what was going on at first. Then we, figured out that he was the dad, and I was like, oh, this is terrible. He's just walked in and seen all this. And then we walked up later on. We walked up to his office and we'd found the suicide note, and I read it out to him, and he had no reaction. It was quite bizarre. And then he rang the brother, the girl's brother, and said, oh, she's done it this time. So we found out she'd actually tried a few times. And then he requested to watch the autopsy, which was denied by the coroner. And he said, well, I'm a medical expert. I'd like to see the autopsy. Now, who wants to see their child's autopsy?
No,
that was just
can't comprehend that.
No, that was just all very strange. And, to that date, even now I occasionally think of her, and I think she'd only be, I won't say how old she would be because that gives away my age. But no, she's only 3 or 4 years younger, 15. She had a whole life ahead of her. And I did quite a few that were 15 and 16. and you think, how, like, what's going on?
It must distort your view on life, seeing that.
I think it
On a
affected me
regular
later
occurrence.
on, and I think just doing so many different kinds of decease, like you've got your suicides, you've got your overdoses, which, in a way, I wouldn't worry about that so much because they were kind of an explanation for why these people died. But
Yes.
it was the accidents or the someone who you went to that was young and died and you didn't know why they died. That used to scare me because I think that could happen to me or my family or,
I find that, and even doing homicide as long as I've done, I still find accidents, car accidents, confronting because it can happen to anyone. With homicide, I can quite often work out why it's happened or see how it's happened. But with accidents, they're called accidents because it could happen to anyone.
You're there 1 minute and you're gone the next.
Did you do any bad traffic accidents?
Yeah, I did quite a few, but the worst one that stayed with me was basically a taxi driver going this way or going one way and two young guys in like a little sports car, red sports car, coming the other way. And it was about maybe 11 o'clock at night. They were going into town and they've come around the corner and they've just collected each other. We're not sure how it happened, but probably the accident investigation came out and they would have found out eventually, but I can't remember all the details. But one of my colleagues got there first. He was on his way home from work, and back in the day before mobile phones, he's had to run into a house on the freeway and call the station. I've actually answered the phone and grabbed my partner and we've bolted down there and the cars were on fire. So he had buckets and he was like throwing buckets over the engines that were. One was up against a telegraph pole and one was in the middle of the road. And my ex-colleague, he was trying to revive the taxi driver who was just slumped over the wheel, and he just kept saying to me, he was obviously in shock, he just kept saying, I can't get him to breathe, I can't get him to breathe. He kept pushing him back and the body kept falling over the wheel. And I had to say to him, he's gone, you've done everything you can. And then when we had a good look at the little sports car, we thought there was one person in it because it was so squashed on one side. It was just like it was like there was half a car. And we called the rescue squad because we couldn't get the body out. While we were waiting for the rescue squad, I was actually just looking in there and I saw an extra foot. And so there was another person that was so squashed all you could see was the bottom half of the foot. So that was, and then had to go and tell the parents. So the boys were 19 at the time. And later on, because it was we were there for so long, it went on for hours. The papers turned up and there was a picture of me without my police hat on. So I actually got in big trouble when I got back to the station later on. They said, well, you should have had your hat on at the accident. And I remember thinking, 3 dead people, hat, what's more important? I ran out of the station because I knew that there was a fatality because one of my colleagues is telling me, and I got paraded and, got in big trouble for not having my police hat on. It was the last thing I thought about when I ran out to, and we know protocol, you're supposed to have your hat on, but to me, I couldn't get my head around the importance of there's 3 dead people and I'm in trouble for not having a hat on.
Sticks with you, like the confronting 3 people who have just died and then trying to help where you killed is very confronting. But when you don't get supported, when you have something like that, it felt trivial at the time. I don't think it's good leadership. I understand protocol and you've got to have rules and in place, but sometimes you've got to put priorities. And to me, getting to an accident where people are trapped and cars are on fire, the priority is not making sure you've got your hat on.
Yeah.
And I think that, that can distort your view on your own organisation if you get that type of commentary. And I've seen, I'm not unique, we've all seen senior people that have adopted that attitude. And my view on it, for what it's worth, is that they like to focus on the little things because they're not comfortable doing the big things. And the big things is looking after your staff if you've been to a triple fatal accident.
True, yeah.
Not worrying about a hat.
But back in those days, you went straight to the next job, didn't you? Like, you didn't really even have time to think about it. Yeah. You just went to the next job.
Well, that's how it was dealt with back then, but and not just police. I think across the board we didn't know ways of dealing with it. But we went to the pub after work. Well, the pub was that was your counselling session.
That was your downtime, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was
And I know we were warned against it, but it was the culture at the time.
Oh, and it did make you. It did make you bond with your work. Like you knew those people you worked with back then. They had your back. They would have done anything for you.
Yeah.
And I remember just going, oh, God, I had a bad day today. This happened, that happened. Then you'd have somebody else go, you think that's bad? and then they'd tell that story and you go, oh, okay. So it was a bit of a competition sometimes, see who had the worst stories.
Who's got the worst stories and that black humour that comes into it, a bit of a comedy. But you've had some funny stuff, and I was doing a little bit of research in preparation for this, and there was an incident where you came back with teeth marks in your head.
Yes, that's right.
Your colleagues paid out on you.
It's not a good look.
Not a good look. Do you want to
well,
tell that story?
We all have funny things that happen that probably most members of the public wouldn't even know about, or you wouldn't tell them, whatever. But there was a lady at Newtown who called the police and said she'd had an explosion at her place. So I've gone round there with partner, and when we got there, she had forgotten why she called us. So we went inside and we found out the explosion was a light bulb that had exploded, and she wanted the police. She didn't trust the electrician, so she wanted the police to change the light bulb for her. But meanwhile, she didn't like us in the house because she obviously had dementia or something. She kept forgetting while we were there. What are you here? She'd turn around and she'd be talking to us, and then she'd turn around and go, who are you? Why are you here? And so at one stage, I kind of approached her and said, look, we're here to help you, and blah, blah, blah. And she just took her dentures out, and I obviously got too close, and she threw them at me, and they got me on the forehead. And so they kind of stuck there for a second, and then fell to the ground. Well, I've just kind of looked down and gone, oh, my God. And my partner's like bright red, laughing his head off. And she's just gone, I'm calling the police. I went, we are. That's why we're here. And she just picked her dentures up and put them back in her mouth, and we left. And I had these little teeth marks. And, of course, we went back and told the story. And so I was the joke at the station for the day. I got assaulted by a 80-something-year-old crazy lady with, who threw her dentures at me. So it was a funny one.
That is, not many people expect to go to work and
there was another one, like when I first got there, I think it was very, very early on. There was a guy that came in every week, and he would report his wife missing, and he would the guys would just give him a couple of pieces of paper, and he would just write for about an hour, and then he'd hand it to us and then just leave. So his report was the same every week. His wife had been kidnapped by Jimmy Barnes and been taken away in Jimmy Barnes' spaceship. What were we going to do about it?
What did you do about it?
I don't know. I don't think we ever found her.
There's characters that you come across in, and I love my career in plain clothes and detectives, but you had some fun in general duties and different things. There was one bloke at Hornsby Police Station, and Sess was his name, and he was a alcoholic and homeless man, but he would actually let himself into the cells. You know how you had cells in the police station, and people have got to come round and check, and the district commander had come round and check how many prisoners and check the prisoners. And I remember one night he's come round and we said, there's 2 prisoners, and he's gone in there and checked, and he said, no, there's actually 3 prisoners. Sess had crawled up, and he couldn't walk properly. He could only crawl, and he had a walking frame, but had managed to get himself in the back of the police station and break into our tight security and put himself in the cell, and he put himself in there. So
if he could get in, how could the other prisoners not get out?
Well, there was one prisoner that escaped, and the door was left open, and
oh God,
we ended up catching him. But he, first of all, we thought maybe he'd crawled out through, how you had the viewing plate, you could pull the plate down and look in. And this was when I was in plain clothes, and the general duty said, we've lost a prisoner. And I've said, well, how? And they've said, we don't know, the cell doors were locked and blah, blah, blah. Can you? And I'm looking at it, go, they can't have been locked. But anyway, that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
But we caught him a couple of hours later, and he'd broken into a house and murdered a budgie. So
a budgie?
Yeah, murdered a budgie. And
what did the budgie do to him?
I don't know, but he and that's just stuck with me, that the escaped prisoner, and when we found him, he'd just murdered a budgie, and he's sitting there with the murdered budgie in a house he'd broken into. So that was bizarre. Quite bizarre. But you come across those. You come across those in general duty. So with your time there, did you always think you'd stay in general duties, or was there something that steered you elsewhere?
No, I think probably right at the beginning, when I was first learning, and there's so much to learn and see and do, I thought I'd be there for a long time. But after 6 years, and pretty full on 6 years, I thought I'll move on now before I get burnt out or I get sick of it or whatever.
Did you feel that you were going to get burnt out, like working? Working the truck, and you had you mentioned 62 licensed premises. Now that's a lot of problems and can happen around closing time. So you would have been in some brawls and getting people out, fail to leave licensed premises. That type of
there was
stuff?
a lot. There was a lot of problems with licensed premises. There was a lot of problems in general, but things would just happen almost right in front of us sometimes. It was, quite funny. One time I remember I was trying to get to the chicken shop up the road on King Street, which is called Clem's. It's still there, I think. And from the station to there, which isn't that far, it's probably, 500 metres or something, we got stopped 3 times and we never got a dinner break that night. Somebody came flying out of the window at one of the pubs and landed just in front of us on the road. So he'd been shot and he ran away because he'd just come out of jail. So we had to, chase him, and then we got back in the car and we went a couple of feet further and an accident happened in front of us, and then there was an assault in front of it, and it was like, oh, we just wanted our dinner, And so sometimes you'd have those crazy nights, and, the full moon nights where you go, uh-oh, it's going to be on
And it did seem to happen that time.
It was
Sometimes
so true.
you just had those crazy nights.
We had one lady that used to light fires in the red telephone boxes back in the day, because there was, they were all over the place. And she'd light one, she'd call us and say, there's a fire, hang up and run to the next one.
Right.
So this was every full moon. and we also had a lot of halfway houses.
Yeah.
I remember the first time one of the guys said, come on, we've got to go down to what do they call it? The possum farm.
Yeah.
And I stupidly, young and naive, I went, why would they have a possum farm at Newtown? It's pretty high density. And they went, no, the rat house. I went, what are you talking about? So, halfway house where there's a lot of people with special needs, as you'd say these days, and they were always setting fires to toilets and blowing things up. And there was, you'd walk in there and they go, I could kill you, because I'll get away with it. I'm crazy. And you just go, oh, you have to put your hand on your gun to make sure that it was still there. And so there was
Makes for tough times.
It was funny. There was just things always, crazy things. Yeah. And then, of course, there was, even a crazy thing happened at a sad situation where I was called to a cot death.
Yeah.
And the baby was about 18 months old. And both the parent and it just, it was a cot death or it suffocated in its bed. We called the morgue attendants and obviously had to go to the morgue for an autopsy. And this morgue attendant turns up and he was the strangest guy that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He turned up and, I was outside talking to the parents and I've kind of ducked into the bedroom where the baby was, and he was trying to put this 18-month-old, which wasn't small, into one of those old brown, school bags that, that we took to school and in kindergarten. And it wouldn't fit. So he was trying to shove it in there. And my partner and I was working with another girl, and we've both gone, don't, you can't do that. He goes, oh, this way nobody will know that there's a baby in there. I can, and I've gone, how disrespectful. I was horrified. And, we're trying to deal with these grieving parents, and there's this stupid morgue attendant who's trying to almost break bones to get this baby into a suitcase. Yeah. So, and that was more horrifying than the cot death.
Yeah.
Weird things happen.
That is, and you're the front line, and that's one thing in general duties. You're the front.
You are,
line
the first one there, yeah.
But all right, a couple of things. As a detective, I hold old habits die hard, and when I'm interviewing someone, I always ask the hard questions. I'm not sure where this one's going to go. But in my research, which I do before I interview people, I've found that when you're in the police, you're also a page 3 mirror girl.
Yeah, that was last week. that was a few years ago now, Gary.
Just a few years ago?
Just a few.
How was that received in the cops? Sorry, could I just explain, because people might not know
there's
what
no
pay 3
anymore.
Mirror girl was, but that was it was always a female, usually, or not usually, I should say.
Always in a bikini.
Always a female in a bikini and a beach shot type scenario. It was on the page 3 of the Daily Mirror, I think, and they were widely known as page 3 mirror girl.
That's right, yeah.
You're in the police at the time. You're in the police that are not very comfortable with police women being there. What sort of reaction did you get when you went to work when that appeared in the paper?
Well, that was either really good or really bad.
Okay, talk us through both.
Some guy said, I put you inside my locker and, say hello to you every day.
That's a bit creepy.
Usually like guys I knew.
Yeah.
I got a few insults as well. Oh, gee, you looked fat in that photo. A bit of criticism. But mostly it was a bit of a laugh, like they just laughed about it. And I don't remember too much bagging or whatever. I think it was probably it was unique. I don't think, well, not that I know of any other female police officer had been in that time. Later on, there was other girls that, I think there was one that was in Playboy and things like that. Yeah. But I didn't see what everybody was thinking, obviously, but the people that I was dealing with were all quite just made a joke.
Because it was unique, because I still remember that, and it was only when I realised researching that it was you, because I remember that as long as ago it was, because it was a police woman.
It was last week.
We wish.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was pretty gutsy. How did that come about?
Well, I when I left school, I was always, I was my height that I am now, just under 5'10" at 12.
Right. Okay.
So I hated being tall, and I was a stick figure, and used to get all those jokes. How's the weather up there? Stalk, all that stuff. So. But it worked for me when I got to about 16, 17. I did some modelling. So it kind of just came from there. I knew some photographers and stuff from my modelling days. I wasn't doing that when I joined the police, but I just did that at school for a bit of extra money or at the end of school. And this photographer just asked me to have some photos taken. And I think he paid me it was like $75 or $100 at the time, which wasn't a great deal then, but, it was all just taken at a beach down at La Perouse. It was all very casual, not professional or glamorous at all. And that was that.
Any criticism from the police, from the hierarchy?
No. I know you had to be careful with secondary employment and all that kind of stuff, but no, I don't think I got asked any questions at that time.
Okay.
No.
Well, it's just you are perhaps the only, as far as I know, the only policewoman that appeared as
You might be putting a challenge out there now.
I don't think they have the page 3 policewoman anymore.
Well, no, they're not in the paper.
Not in the paper. Okay. No challenge. Look, I think it's probably a good time. We'll have a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about your career in plainclothes, also as an undercover operative, and post-traumatic stress, which I know is something that you're comfortable in talking about, that when you left the police, but also, very excitingly, your career outside the police after you've left the police as a novel writer and fictional crime. And I've been reading one of your books, and it's a great read. And Lexi Rogers, I want to find out if you are, in fact, Lexi Rogers. So we'll have a short break and back shortly.
Okay, thanks.
Cheers. This podcast series is brought to you by True Crime Australia. Visit icatchkillers.com.au for additional materials such as articles on what you heard, videos and galleries. You can search for the I Catch Killers with Gary Jubilant official group on Facebook and join in with discussion. See you for the next episode of the podcast.